Tēnā koutou katoa, ka hui mai nei I tēnei ata. Welcome to the Aotearoa Circle's November online hui. Ko Larissa Cooney tōku ingoa, ko Ati Hau Nuia Paparangi tōku iwi. Nā mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa. Nau mai, hoki mai, ki te hui o Aotearoa Circle. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
I'm Larissa Cooney. My iwi connections whakapapa to the Wanganui River, and I currently reside in the beautiful sunny Tauranga Bay of Plenty. I'm the co-chair of Aotearoa Circle with my fellow co-chair, James Palmer, Secretary for the Environment. And I have the honour of opening this morning's session, so welcome. Before we kick off today's session, I would like to open us with our morning karakia, which is a karakia specifically written for Aotearoa Circle. So, nō reira, me karakia timatanga tātou. Tuko a te wairua, mana e whakahau mano, e whakaora te rerehua o Aotearoa, mō ngā uru whakaheke. Hei, arataki ia mātou mahi me tata mātou whainga. Matua ki a hono ai te ira tangata ki te taiao. Toia mai, rā te kaha me te nākau pono ki a hautu. Tahi ai tātou ki ngā awha arahi ki a ora aki te au tupupu. Ki a poipoia mō ake tonu atu, whakamaua kia tīna. Hui e, tā kie. The translation of this karakia is very fitting for the mahi that we do here at Aotearoa Circle, and I will share that with you now. Release the spirit to restore Aotearoa's natural beauty for future generations, to guide our work and purpose and connecting people with their environment. Let us draw in strength and integrity to meet the headwinds of today and lead for a better planet, ensuring it is nurtured forever. Ka mau te wihi. Now, with this powerful collective intention in our hearts and minds, I would like to start by giving a special mention and mihi to our founding guardians of Aotearoa Circle, of whom we are extremely grateful for. The late Sir Rob Fenwick, moi mai rā I te rangatira, and those who are here with us today, Sir Jonathan Porritt and Vicky Robertson. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge my fellow guardians who are in attendance today. David Carter, Volker Izzy Fenwick, and Carolyn Tremaine. Kia ora koutou. I would like to welcome you, our leading and active partners of the Aotearoa Circle. You are the circle. You share the workload, you bring the inspiration for the work, and you get out in your own organisations and the wider world and apply what you've learned. Ka rawe koutou. Thank you. You'll be hearing from a number of outstanding guests today, and also from a range of our team partners from the Aotearoa Circle. I am proud to be part of the Aotearoa Circle. My focus is all in my work is on finding ways to influence positively. The Aotearoa Circle is a very strong fit with my own values, because its work is about influencing the systems change we need to restore New Zealand's natural capital. There's a whakatauki proverb from my iwi, ko Ati Hau Nuia Paparangi, which sums up my source of inspiration. Ko au te awa, ko te awa ko au. I am the river, and the river is me. We are inherently interlinked and connected with nature and each other. And if our environment is well, we will be well, and vice versa. Thank you so much for being here today. We know this is an incredibly busy time of the year and what has been an incredibly busy year, both for us here at the Circle and I'm sure for all of you. Ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. I'd like to hand over now to our wonderful Aotearoa Circle CEO, Vicky Watson, who will talk us through some of the work that's been done by all of you in the last year. Kia ora, Vicky.
Kia ora. Thank you, Larissa, both for this morning, making the time to come onto the hui, but also everything you do for the Circle's board and the work that you actively get engaged with as well. Thank you to all of our partners who are still coming in online, joining us as we take you through the work that you have all contributed to in 2023, and make sure you're in the loop about also what comes next. Ko Vicky Watson toku ingoa, ko taku mahi ki Aotearoa Circle, ko Te Chief Executive. Welcome. You are welcome to ask questions at any time during the conversations. Please just use the chat function. We'll put these to the guests as time allows. Please keep your cameras and mics muted and off if you're not presenting. That just makes it easier. A reminder, we will be recording this hui. There are a lot of people who have registered, but also those who weren't able to make it. We have a lot to cover in the next 90 minutes, but we will absolutely get you away on time. We'll be going through updating you what's latest on our seafood adaptation strategy as it moves as well into the implementation of that. We'll also talk briefly about our TNFD program and how you can get involved in this if you're not already for next year. We'll update you on our transport work stream with the transport sector climate scenarios. You'll hear from one of our wonderful Rangatahi advisory panel, and we also want to bring you up to date on our biotechnology work stream, which is very new. But before all of that, we're very lucky to have joining us with us this morning from the UK. He's a writer. He's a campaigner, a holder of a CBE. He is an advisor to leading global companies on how to develop solutions to the climate and environmental crises we face. He's co-founder of the Aotearoa Circle, and we thank him for making himself available from the UK to talk to us, complete with the glass of red wine while we are all sipping our coffee. So, morena and good evening to you, Sir Jonathan Porritt. I shall hand over to hear from what all your the global uptake. Thank you.
Vicky, thank you so much, and Larissa and all my colleagues in the Circle. Kia ora. Lovely to be with you this morning. Yes, this evening for me, but so far I haven't really had a chance to drink my glass of red wine, so I hope I'm still vaguely coherent. I am very struck by the moment that we're in right now. I have a bit of a privilege here. I've actually been able to read the year in review for the Aotearoa Circle in advance. It doesn't actually come out until next year, I think early next year, because it's the review of 2023. But Vicky asked me to do a little commentary for that, or at least a quick statement for that. And when I was reading through it, I just thought, this is really quite extraordinary what's going on here with the Circle. And quoting from the two co-chairs, from Larissa and James, as they put in their introduction, the Aotearoa Circle is a unique partnership. There is no equivalent anywhere else in the world. Indeed. And what I went on to add to that is as follows. I hope that Vicky will allow this to go through the editorial process, which imposes a unique responsibility on all of us involved in the Circle to act urgently and creatively in ways that are commensurate with the twin nature and climate crises bearing down on us right now. And that, I suppose, touches several points for me, which is action is what really matters now. Personal engagement is what really matters now. An understanding of the nature of the challenge we face is what really matters now. So in my short commentary this morning for all of you, I want to address you all personally in a way, and to ask you to think what combination of emotions you're currently feeling when you think about you and your organization in this moment, not in some other moment in the past where you were personally or professionally 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago, whatever it might be, or where you're going to be tomorrow, which may not be the same as where you are today. But what's this emotional palette that you're looking at right now? And thinking about the amazing number of people on this call and the astonishing depth of experience and creativity that you bring to this involvement in the circle, I'm thinking that it's bound to be a combination of trepidation, consternation about what is actually going on, fear in terms of what this really means for all of us in our different roles and different societies, a sense of excitement at the way in which this might oddly, even at this very last moment, open up the possibility to do things in completely different ways from how we've done them up until now. A deep sense, I guess, for some of us that this is now the point where we really have to come good about what it is that we've aspired to make happen in this very complex and contested world. And that, for me, is really crucial, because in the run-up to COP28, as you know, the 28th Conference of the Parties, which has done pretty much nothing from COP1 to COP28 other than put in place useful, but nonetheless not very influential international processes and agreements. In the run-up, we're all going to be asked to think very differently about what it is that's going on in the world today. And I really do mean very differently. So just yesterday, for instance, UNEP, which is obviously one of the UN's principal agencies dealing with this whole climate story, brought out its latest report about what is going on in the world today. It does this annual gap analysis on where we are and where we should be. And I'm just going to give you 2 quotes from that. I was reading it on the train coming back from London today, so I want to make sure I get this absolutely right. 2 things just to remind you of what that gap looks like from a UN point of view. Firstly, where we are in terms of the production of fossil fuels. Currently planned production of fossil fuels by 2050, particularly from the main 20 oil and gas producing nations, is 350% greater than is compatible with our 1.5 degrees centigrade target, and 150% above that consistent with 2 degrees centigrade. So you probably know that a new report was published showing that all 20 of the largest oil and gas producing nations in the world, all of them without exception, have hugely ambitious targets to expand their production of fossil fuels, oil and gas in particular. And the second one, which we're much more familiar with, I think, because we've heard this now for the last 4 or 5 years, as it says, commenting on the nationally determined contributions from different countries over the course of the last 5 years or so, the current position that we have to report on now shows that to remain below 1.5 degrees centigrade, emissions must fall by 43% by 2030. As things stand, they are on track to rise by 9%. So that's the kind of gap that we get up every morning and confront. We should be heading towards 43% reduction by 2030. And at the moment, as of now, and given everything that governments have said they're going to do, let alone everything they have or haven't done, it's going to see an increase of 9% by 2030. it is quite something to have to get up every day and confront the nature of that gap. And then, of course, we've got what's happening in the real world, by which I do not mean the world of politics, by the way, and I certainly don't mean the world of the financial services sector or the investment world. I'm talking about the only real world that we have, which is, of course, our planet, what is happening on planet Earth today. And I'm not going to go into this at any depth, Vicky, rest assured, but you will know for sure that 2023 has been a year from hell. It is certainly going to be the hottest year ever until 2024, obviously. And we have seen climate records break or broken at literally every point throughout the course of the year, in pretty much every part of the world. And in many respects, scientists now are struggling, genuinely struggling, to find words to communicate with us and to our politicians the nature of what is actually happening out there. Not theoretically happening, but what is happening in real time to real people's lives in real communities with real impacts on our economy. And I'm more and more struck by this difference between the empirical database that we can now draw on with the importance, of course, the importance of the scenarios that we still have to use in order to track out what might or might not happen for different sectors. So we'll hear later in this meeting, we'll hear later about transport and energy scenarios, which the Circle has actually developed. But I'm really taken now by the fact that those scenarios are a pale shadow of what is actually happening in the real world today. So I'm not going to bang on and on about that. 2023 has been a nightmare. Rest assured, 2024 is going to be even worse. And that is for a number of different factors, but primarily because of El Nino, which of course started earlier this year, at least 6 months ago, and is now driving a whole process of climatic impacts, which will build through the first half of 2024, and leave us wondering at the end of 2024 exactly what kind of hell have we created for ourselves. That is my most apocalyptic prediction. I've got lots of other things to add, which I hope will help offset that, as it were. So I'm very struck by these physical tipping points. People talk a lot about the physical tipping points, and I am very focused at the moment on what I call the social tipping points. And those social tipping points are what really gives me a sense of hope for the future. And I just want to touch quickly on 4 of those in my comments. So the first is what I call a socio-technical tipping point. 3 reports in the last month looking at the role of solar power, solar energy in the world today, and basically all saying that within the course of the next 15 to 20 years, solar will essentially be the technology that outcompetes every other technology on planet Earth. And it points to one thing in particular, which is really interesting, and I'll bet all of us on this call have fallen for this little trap. It points to, these studies point to the fact that some people think we've now had all the innovation breakthroughs that we're going to get from solar. That is simply not true. We have a pipeline of amazing further innovation in solar, which will further transform the nature of this technology and further transform its contribution to energy futures all around the world, rich nations and poor nations, as you know. The second tipping point is one that I keep my eye on very carefully indeed, which is a kind of socioeconomic tipping point, which is what is happening in the insurance sector. The only bit of the global financial services sector that are actually really focused on real-time empirical evidence coming back from the planet is the insurance sector, not banking, and certainly not investment. But insurance are absolutely looking at what the implications of this are now in real time. And I have a very strong hunch that within the course of the next year, maybe 18 months, 2 years, we will see the insurance sector and the reinsurance sector take a starkly different position from the one which they equivocate about today. And that will be massive. Without insurance, there's no global economy, there's no local economy, there's no national economy. So once that bit of the financial services sector globally begins to remind people that this is now different from anything we've anticipated before, it'll be different. Thirdly, there's a lot of new thinking going on. I'm very conscious today that we are sharing this particular moment in New Zealand with the launch of a new initiative from Pure Advantage, Recloaking Papatuanuku, which is coming forward with a fantastically ambitious project, essentially, to persuade the new New Zealand government what it needs to do now to recloak Aotearoa with regenerated forests, with restored, repaired forests, to go for broke when it comes to using that particular nature-based solutions to the terrible degradation that has gone on in New Zealand for so many years. It's a wonderful document they brought out, which is, I'm sure, going to be shared imminently. And then lastly, my fourth, and maybe the craziest tipping point I want to offer you, because I bet many of you on this call share my frustration that you can't actually believe that so many people don't understand what's going on, just don't understand the true depth of the crisis that we're in at the moment. It's impossible sometimes to go through a normal day and think, why don't you get this? What is wrong with you? What's not happening? So my tipping point for this time next year, as we head towards COP29, is that there will be a massive breakthrough in enlightenment about an understanding of what really needs to happen. A kind of a tipping point of awareness that eludes us at the moment. It's always just there. It's always sort of on the horizon, but we've never quite been able to grasp it in the way that we want to. And for me, this tipping point is fascinating because it will essentially be the moment when we realize that setting the laws of physics, which is what determines what happens in the physical world, setting the laws of physics against the laws, quotes, laws of the market is suicidal, is literally suicidal. Physics is physics. It is a set of immutable laws that basically control or influence the life of every single organism on this planet. The laws of the market are not laws. They are temporary norms which have been developed over the last 5, 6 decades, if you like, that would have you believe that those laws are the equivalent of the laws of nature, the laws of physics. Well, eventually that whole story is going to be busted wide open because physics, the physics of climate change is different. The physics of climate change doesn't care about what is happening in the planet today. It doesn't do politics. It doesn't care about political egos. It doesn't care about the religious beliefs that people might have. It certainly doesn't call out all the naked emperors who preside over our lives today in so many different countries all around the world. And sadly, it doesn't, physics doesn't actually care about all the things that we care about. It particularly doesn't care about children and grandchildren and future generations and all that kind of stuff that goes with the rhetoric of sustainable development. It doesn't care about the gods that people worship or believe control their lives. It doesn't even care about money and it certainly doesn't care about status. Physics is different. So for me, we're heading towards a moment where we will have to recognize the difference between the laws of physics and the notional, spurious, now increasingly damaging so-called laws of the market, which are not, as I said, they're not laws at all. The real question for all of us is, how quickly will that happen? How quickly can we make it happen? What can we do to encourage people to understand the depth of the illusion in which we're living? And how do we combine our professional experience and competence and our skills with our personal values, our passion for a better world, so that we can expedite this transformation in the way that it now needs to be expedited? So that's my thing. I'm absolutely certain that this is going to happen. If it happens by COP29, I'll be absolutely cock-a-hoop, as you can imagine. But I wouldn't mind it happening within the next 3 to 4 years. That wouldn't be bad either. So Vicky, I'll end there because I probably overrun my time, and I'm not sure that everyone was thinking that we'd be talking about the laws of physics. But anyway, there we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. I think. Always, yeah, the way you articulate what is happening globally to kind of give us that reference here in New Zealand and sort of reflect how so many people here are feeling as well is it's helpful to get all of that out, because so much of that sits in our heads and our hearts to understand. We have got a couple of questions, and I've been writing a few as well. Doug Paulin, CEO of Sealord, is on the call. Major climate events don't seem to be driving countries that are large emitters to make enough change. So what will?
Totally agree. It's absolutely astonishing to me that the climate events, as you call them, the disasters that we're already seeing, have not had that impact. I guess that's why I went after the insurance sector, particularly in America, where you're now looking at climate-induced insured damage of at least $100 billion a year, and add to that the underinsured and uninsured damage to economies. And that's where I think change will come, because they can't go on any longer operating with their current business model. So that sounds bonkers. You'd think that people would look at these disasters and just say, yeah, okay, this is all the evidence we need. Now we need to change. That hasn't been borne out in reality, as you've said. So we need to think where the additional impetus of change is going to come. Politicians mostly around the world are driven more by money, I have to say, than anything else. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It just means they're thinking about growth and jobs and innovation and all the rest of it, balance of payments and cost of living and so on. So money speaks far more powerfully than morality, essentially, in our political world. And the insurance industry dominates that money equation.
It's interesting. One of the comments which I picked up from you this morning, which I don't always hear, but I am going to grab it, is a lot of people don't understand what is actually happening, what is impacting our economy. And you actually have kind of kept it to the economy, not actually what's happening to the environment and so on. And so I'm just sort of wondering, what is your challenge to business leaders if you're saying that the political world is not making those moves? What do you think business leaders here and on this call, but also around the world, need to do, I guess, with COP28 coming up, but, you know, the challenge that you would like to give?
Yes, thank you, Vicky. I'm constantly reminded when you look back at films or TV series about what life was like in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. And in the most astonishing way, everybody is smoking. And everybody is sitting there in rooms which are presumably just fogging up more and more with the tobacco smoke. And in those days, business leaders sat quite comfortably next to the business leaders of the tobacco industry, and they felt that they were all there contributing to the economic well-being of whatever country they were in. Only at a certain point did they realize that those leaders of the tobacco industry were intent on making money out of killing people. And at that point, most business leaders said, I'm not going to have anything to do with this industry, because this industry is tainted by its greed and tainted by its knowledge of the impact of its products. So my challenge to the business community these days is, when are people going to understand that the fossil fuel companies are the tobacco companies of yore? Today, 21st century, those fossil fuel companies are in exactly the same position. They have exactly the same knowledge of the degree to which their products and the expanded production of those products is going to be responsible for killing millions of people, far more than tobacco ever killed. And when are you going to stop sitting in rooms with fossil fuel company representatives because they are criminals? Now, it's a bit difficult in New Zealand because you don't have so many of them as we do here in the UK or in America or Europe or whatever. You may not have to spend too much time with the criminal class as it has now become. But trust me, that moment is going to come. That's a moral tipping point, not a social tipping point, a moral tipping point, when people realize that consorting with or having anything to do with this industry now contaminates your own sense of purpose and moral value. And I do think, Vicky, that people in business are going to have to start making judgments of that kind pretty damn soon.
You also commented, I think it was number 4 of your social tipping points, the fact that people, surprisingly to you, but just aren't aware. They don't seem to be aware of what is actually happening, that physics of climate. Why has that awareness eluded us until now? And you're really naming 2024 as this is going to happen. I believe that this is going to happen next year. Is there something that all the partners on the call can do to kind of hurry that along as well?
Possibly, but the root cause of this, and I need to be absolutely clear here, are utterly failing, underperforming politicians. In those countries which have had a really intelligent, compassionate, just debate about the impact of climate change and what we need to do about it, and there are a few of them, particularly here in Europe, where governments have gone out and invited their citizens to join in a proper discussion about what climate change means for them and what they need to do and what business needs to do and what we all need to do as individual citizens. In those countries, people do understand the nature of the challenge. They may be a little bit uncomfortable about some of the policies that are coming forward from those governments, but they get the fact that this is potentially an existential threat to everything that people care about in that country. Now, it's far too many politicians all around the world, and I'm certainly not going to mention either New Zealand, perish the thought, or even my own country, the UK, which has now become one of the most egregious recidivist nations in the world when it comes to facing up to its climate responsibilities. But without naming names, as it were, many politicians make it impossible for ordinary citizens to understand what the true nature of this crisis is really all about. So business can help a bit because they can engage with their customers, with their stakeholders, with their suppliers. They can be absolutely upfront about why we're doing this and how important it is to the net well-being of the nation in which each business plays its part. Of course, that's crucial. But ultimately, Vicky, sorry to have to say this, the ultimate responsibility lies with how politicians choose to articulate their responsibilities in this area. And we have a massive deficit in that regard all over the world.
So we're coming to the last question, and I'm going to ask it, but I'm also going to say, can you somehow, when you answer it, leave us with some hope in this answer? So a bit of pressure. Not only have you not heard the question, but I'm asking, can you give us some hope? You know, there's a lot of, you know, if the work was hard a year or two ago, it's even harder now. So, you know, we need something from you to keep us going. So just a question from Doug again. How do you balance the need to change with the cost to change? Because if there aren't any answers, and let's just sort of alternative fuels for some of the marine industry, if there are no answers yet, or the cost of those answers means you might go out of business. Tough last question.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm all too mindful of the fact that this notion that the transformation is going to cost more than it's going to provide by way of economic benefits, that narrative is one that has been created by defenders of the status quo, by incumbent industries, by all those who don't want citizens to move because they're suddenly kiboshed by this fear that it's going to cost more money than it will save them. And actually, there's really not a lot of basis behind that. So I mentioned the Pure Advantage launch today, Recloaking Papatuanuku, which contrasts what it would cost to sequester a ton of CO2 by this amazing investment in forestry in New Zealand, $32 per ton of CO2, versus what it is going to cost New Zealand if it buys its offsets on the international market, which is at least twice that, and almost certainly won't bring the carbon benefits that you want. So when you have that kind of absolutely clear example of where the economic benefit lies, as well as the sustainability and the biodiversity benefit, then why can politicians not see their way around that? So I'm being a bit ungracious, but let us never forget the power of the incumbency. That means that most of the narratives that we hear, read, discuss, see on social media, these narratives are tainted by very powerful vested interests that have no interest in people actually understanding the real truth of it, which is why the responsibility, Vicky, why I stress this, the responsibility of us personally and in our businesses, in our organizations is enormous. We have to do what we can to correct that set of false narratives. By the way, that is not a negative comment, Vicky. This is a very positive thought. And I've been so positive about what's going to happen between now and COP29 at the end of next year. I can hardly face myself at the end of this session. So there we go.
Thank you, Jonathan. And look, thank you personally, because you make yourself available. You know, I email you, I ask to catch up with you. You come and talk to the board and you have sessions with them. We send large draft documents over to you to get, your comments and feedback and where can we push harder. So you do an awful lot for the Circle from afar. So we just really appreciate that. And thank you for zooming in tonight. And I do hope now that you can sit back and have your glass of wine and enjoy your evening.
She'll be with you till the end of the session, Vicky. But yeah, we're enjoying the rest of it.
Jonathan. That's marvelous. Look, Jonathan has been focused a lot when he's talked, he's focused a lot on what is going to happen in the future. And so that next generation has not only part of our vision at the Circle to restore natural capital for future generations, but it has kind of made us think inside the Circle, how do we not just talk about young people, but we get talking with young people? And so that was the philosophy behind the 2023 starting up an official Circle Rangatahi Advisory Panel, a group of younger New Zealanders drawn from our leading partners who can hold us to account and offer their advice and guidance. So it's my pleasure, and hopefully Izzy and Maura, you can get your videos on, to welcome you to talk about the Rangatahi Advisory Panel this morning. Welcome.
Thank you, Vicky. Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Izzy Fenwick toka wingawa. I have the pleasure of being both a guardian of the circle and also the conduit for the circle's Rangatahi Advisory Panel. What we're trying to do with the Rangatahi Advisory Panel is make sure that we have the next generation at the table, making decisions and being heard. And as a next generation whenek, ko tā Rob Whenek toko papa, contributing to the mahi of the Aotearoa Circle, this practice of bringing intergenerational wisdom is a real honor and something I feel incredibly passionate about. This, as Vicky said, was our first year, and I feel we can confidently say that it has been a success. But rather than me tell you that, we have a Rangatahi Advisory Panel member here to share her experience instead. So I'm very delighted to introduce Morag Graham from ANZ. Morag studied agricultural and environmental science at Massey University before joining ANZ, where she is a relationship manager. Kia ora, Morag, and welcome.
Kia ora, Izzy. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So, why did you want to be a part of the Rangatahi Advisory Panel?
So I guess when the request for applications landed in my inbox for the Rangatahi Advisory Panel, I saw an opportunity to represent my generation and the future generations to come, and ultimately we're the people that are going to be living with the long-term impacts of the decisions made today and the work that's being done today. So I saw that as a great opportunity to represent us and to have our say. I think it can be really disheartening sometimes growing up, and I'm thinking more when I was at university and you're learning about these really pressing issues in regards to the climate and nature and things, and to feel like other than what you can do as an individual, you can't really have much of a say. And so this also represented that opportunity to have that seat at the table, like you say, and yeah, that's the reason why I was really keen to be a part of it.
And was it what you expected, Morag?
Yeah, I guess given it was the first year, I really had no expectations of what it might look like. There was nothing kind of to look back on, and from my knowledge, there's not really anything similar to the Rangatahi Panel in Aotearoa. But I did have some, I guess, rather than expectations, I had some hope, and the hope was that the thoughts and the feedback from the panel would be listened to and would be really valued. And I think, you know, that first hui that we all went to in Wellington, and then the feedback that we've had since the work that we've done has begun, has shown me that, that the Rangatahi Panel has been really valued and respected, and that the Aotearoa Circle is really excited about it. So that's been really great.
Awesome. Is there anything that you learnt in this experience?
Oh, I learned heaps. I think, like, obviously you learn a lot about the specific working streams that we're on, where we focused on the agri-adaptation roadmaps and TNFDs. But outside of that, from a more personal point of view, learned a lot about challenging myself and challenging how I think, and also about critically thinking. And something that the panel highlighted for me, and I think it's an obvious point but worth mentioning, is the value that you do get in bringing a whole lot of different people with different backgrounds and things to a working stream. And I think, you know, we're 8 people that work for different companies and organizations and different industries, and often it was when we were working on something that it was the people that might have been from outside of that industry that had really valuable and insightful things to say about it. And I guess that just shows what a fresh perspective can bring to the table.
I love that, Morag, and I've definitely observed that from some of the other Rangatahi Advisory Panel members, in saying, I've had no experience in agri and you're asking me to contribute to this agri work stream, but I can get my contribution, I can see the impact of my contribution even just as a civilian and as a next generation who's going to experience the outcomes of some of these systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything that you would recommend we change as we gear up for year 2 of our Rangatahi Advisory Panel? We're actually doing that application process at the moment. So if we've got any leading partners on the call as well, give your Rangatahi a nudge to get their applications in for year 2. anything you would recommend we think about, Morag?
I suppose, you know, like I said, we've focused on 2 working streams this year, being the agri-adaptation roadmaps and TNFDs. And there's, of course, a whole lot of other work that the Aotearoa Circle's doing. And I think it would be really valuable, and also trying to think of how we can get more value out of the rangatahi panel itself, to have more oversight on some of that working streams. I know there's a balance between how much work we can do on the panel and have our normal jobs as well, but particularly if, you know, there's one stream that someone might be interested in because of their line of work or their passions or whatever, having that access to contribute to that working stream, I think could be really beneficial for everyone at the end of the day.
I love that suggestion, Morag, and I appreciate what a place of passion that must come from, because you do have a day job outside of the work that you do for us in this space. And I have been very protective of the time that you and the other panel members contribute to this. So it really warms my heart to hear that what you think could be better is even more time.
2 more, yeah.
But I will always endeavour to protect everyone's time, because I know that there's only so much you can take on. But I love that is the suggestion you would make. So thank you so much. And I guess just a sort of a final question before we wrap this up, is there anything that you want us and everyone on this call to kind of take from your experience, or hear about your experience in terms of some of the stuff that they might be doing within their own organisations?
Yeah, well, I guess firstly, I'd like to say, obviously, thank you to the Aotearoa Circle for the experience. And I think for everyone listening, like it not to undermine the value that young people can bring to the table, and how much it means to us. Obviously, I can't speak on behalf of all the other panel members, but for me personally, how much it's meant to have our opinions and our thoughts and questions and concerns listened to and answered. And so I do really hope that the rangatahi panel sort of format and structure is something that most, or if not all, New Zealand businesses and organisations can adopt in the future, because it's been it's brought a lot of value to myself, and I think you know, the feedback from members of the circle, it's brought a lot of value back to them as well.
Awesome, Morag, and we have definitely heard a resounding amount of feedback from everyone involved about how impactful it has been. And I guess just a little indication for some others on the call, we did a session with one of our leading partners recently, and they found it so impactful they wanted to share the recording with their board. So I guess that we've been we've just had a lot of really great feedback about the input that you've had, Morag, and the rest of the panel. So thank you so much for all of the time that you've given to us this year, and even this morning on this call. I know you've ducked out of a meeting to be with us today. So
that's all right. Thank you. Thank you for your support as well, Izzy. It's been great. Yeah.
Pleasure. Thanks, Morag.
Thanks.
I'm going to throw us to Jack now. Kia ora, Jack.
Kia ora, Izzy. Thank you very much. It's great to be able to transition from going from the words of wisdom from Jonathan Porrick to the Rangatahi Advisory Panel, and now to be able to talk about the Aotearoa Circle's implementation. So to introduce myself, kia ora koutou, ko Paroa Takahau Kāinga no Manawatu me Ingarangi Oku Tipuna, he kaitohu whakatinana o e Aotearoa Circle, e noho ana o e Tamaki Makaurau e Nainei, ko Jack Keys aho. So I've had the pleasure of meeting many of you and presenting to you in the past, but those who I haven't, my role is Implementation Director at the Aotearoa Circle, and I look after our agriculture, food and tourism work streams. And that means that my role is about taking some of those really impactful scenario reports and roadmaps that the Circle's launched over the past few years and delivering that into activity, which all of you have contributed towards scoping and shaping. And we've got several projects that are underway or being started right now. And this morning, I'm going to spend a few minutes taking you through a brief showcase of a couple of those initiatives. So that we can get through the full agenda, I'll have to go through them relatively fast. So if people do have questions or comments and want to connect about them afterwards, please do feel welcome to reach out. the first initiative that the Aotearoa Circle's initiative is what's been termed an Aotearoa response to modern genetic technologies. And this piece of work came out of both our Manakai initiative launched at the end of 2022 and the Agri-Adaptation Roadmap launched this year, where leadership group members and the sector representatives that we spoke with saw some quite significant gaps in New Zealand's preparedness for the global acceleration in this technology. So alongside our government agency and sector partners, there's a two-phase project which we've launched. The first phase is looking at this environmental impact assessment, which is going to be going through the process of prioritizing a range of different genetic technologies that can be applied to the New Zealand food system, and looking at those across multiple industries, the relevance at a catchment level for red meat sector, horticulture, cropping, dairy. And while looking at this kind of integrated environmental approach, there'll also be considerations and analysis, at least at a macro level, of some of the consumer, community, social, and economic impacts. The second piece of, or the second phase of this work is a kind of sequenced action roadmap. And that's where we'll be working through what the key steps and order of steps will be, both for the public and private sector, in terms of actions for Aotearoa in response to these technologies, both through a status quo approach and through a potential update of our approach in New Zealand. And that's going to include what are all of those key considerations to the actions and the timing. With this initiative, as I said, it's already been kicked off. And so we've created the first information pack on the technology range, which is being scoped for being used in the project. We've got an advisory group which has hosted their first workshop and hosted a number of subject matter expert sessions. And the next step and what we'll be working through over the next couple of months is pulling together the first application of these different genetic technologies and doing the initial analysis. And this is being done with our project delivery partners, PwC. So we're expecting to be able to launch the environmental impact report in early 2023, probably around March, and the sequence roadmap following on not long from there. So we thank PwC for their contributions to this work, and AgMart, who's supporting funding for this initiative. And it's one that we're really excited to be able to have kicked off out of our roadmaps and be bringing in for a finish in early next year. The second initiative that I'll speak to is our enhanced capital access. And this is one that many of you may have already been involved with, as we had a sustainable finance webinar that we hosted last month, where we had over 350 attendees registered as one of our largest webinars that we've hosted. And over 30% of our live attendees were able to complete our pre-webinar survey, which has given us some really fascinating results, where 60% of those involved were unaware of sustainable finance or perceived it as too complicated or expensive to engage in. And that was despite the fact that 80% are already intending to make a related investment over the next 24 months. So that really captures the essence of the problem and why our leadership groups for the Agri-Adaptation Roadmap, but also the Tourism Adaptation Roadmap, prioritize this as one of the most urgent actions. And that's why the Aotearoa Circle has picked this up as a key implementation activity. So after that webinar, we've since hosted a bank-only specialist topic workshop, where we've been able to take a deep dive into what we heard as the key challenges and opportunities to enable better access to capital, testing some of those assumptions and understanding what's important with our banking partners. I'd like to thank Chapman Tripp and Pip Best at EY for supporting us with that session. And we've then been able to relay those insights and test those hypotheses and some deep dive sessions with our sectors. So we've hosted an agriculture sector and a tourism sector specific workshop. And this has enabled us to now take it through the broad picture that we got from our roadmaps, the deep dive and understanding from our banks, and then the sector specific implications, so that we can make sure that any action and further work streams that we look at kicking off are going to be the most relevant and impactful that they can. what does that actually mean and what's coming up next? Well, we've got one more sector related workshop, which will be with the seafood sector early next month. And after the completion of the seafood workshop, we'll be producing a summary briefing that's going to summarize what are the key outputs and findings from the full workshop series. But in addition to that, we're already getting started on the first deliverable, I guess, out of this work stream, which is going to be a funding and finance ecosystem map, which has been prioritized as also a really important and missing piece of the puzzle in terms of how we increase the education and awareness in this space. So those outputs you'll see come towards the end of this year and the start of next year, which will allow us to also build into further workstream development for 2024. And that brings me to the last piece that I'll speak to today. So as Jonathan has introduced at the start of our session, we have some pretty great challenges ahead. The actions that I've spoke about are looking to support New Zealand's adaptation to some of those. And another significant area is our oceans. And we know that the threat to our oceans go beyond climate change. There's the warming waters and ocean acidification that heating world brings, challenges of sedimentation, plastics, general pollution, and our seafood industry are well aware of these. And I think it's why the Aotearoa Circle had the marine environment as one of our priority areas where it's been focused on since about 2019. And the seafood adaptation strategy, one of the key pieces of work that's come from that marine focus, has been, we've been working on that for over 12 months now. And that's brought together experts from across the worlds of fishing and aquaculture, science and regulation in true Aotearoa Circle fashion. And we've been working with organizations such as NIWA, Cawthron, GNS Science, and MPI. The focus recently has been on the adaptation for 3 specific species: snapper as an inshore species, salmon representing aquaculture, and hoki as a deep water species. And what we've moved on to now is, after completing the adaptation process across those species, now looking to conduct additional pilot studies of what we've learned through that process in other sectors. And that's been kicked off with a mussel workshop held in Nelson earlier this month, where we were able to do 2 days with leaders, thought leaders and representatives from across the mussel industry to work on adaptation. And I'm really pleased to be able to pass on to Jody now, who's the implementation director, and my colleague at the Aotearoa Circle who's leading this work, and she'll be able to take a bit more of a deep dive into what some of those next steps are. And we have a really exciting guest alongside Jody so that we can understand a bit more about the thoughts, what's coming next in terms of this space. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll pass over to Jody.
Tēnā katoa katoa. Thank you, Jack. As you mentioned, the seafood industry across fishing and aquaculture activities, both at sea and in our land-based operations, are already feeling the immediate pressures of the climate crisis on our daily business, on our bottom line. So we are feeling past that threshold of needing urgent action and solutions for sector-wide challenges. So over this past year, our implementation group has been focusing on key objectives of the strategy, bringing together practical knowledge and building that resilient prosperity we're after. And that's by identifying priorities for individual and sector-wide action. Jack had mentioned some of those workshops. We had over 100 participants in our adaptation pathways planning workshops to date, and we're now breaking down about 30 key actions into individual deliverables for, and those include implementation support guidance for sector uptake. But as always, the difference really comes down to actions being taken by individuals. So it's my pleasure to introduce Charles Heafy, who's the Technical Manager of Fishing and Operations at Sealord and a member of our incredibly driven implementation group. Welcome, Charles.
Good morning, Jody. Good morning, everyone.
All right. We're going to jump straight into it with our time today with a few questions. So first off, what does implementation mean for this work?
Well, this work started as a we looked at, we did scenario planning, so to try and understand what are our likely, the world we're going to be living in. We looked at positive and negative. Our leadership group gave us a a strategy and a vision to work to, and then the implementation group is how we get there. You know, we chose to go down a pathway of looking at case studies, where, you know, as Jack mentioned, where they were representative across the various sectors. We chose individual species. It could have been in an area or a region, Chatham Rise or Hauraki Gulf. And the tool that we used with these was adaptation pathways. How do we make decisions and activity now, which we know will keep us on the track to get to our outcome.
Fantastic. So adaptation pathways is something that we as an implementation group learned as we went, but what are some of the biggest things that you've learned through these years of going through and understanding those climate change scenarios and then looking at these adaptation pathways and now pushing implementation? Is there anything that really stands out?
I think the first thing for me was a personal lesson that, you know, these are massive problems with a huge amount of uncertainty. So, you know, just how you eat that elephant, it was a big learning, and I think that's having the right people in the room. As mentioned, you know, we've got industry, regulation, science, all working together. So that was a big learning. In terms of adaptation pathways, they're a tool to keep us working, keep us focused, moving forward without worrying about doing the wrong thing, because it's about not just what we can do. You know, there's a list of things we can do, but it's when we do those things. You know, it is the wrong time now to decide on a particular kind of replacement fuel. That's not ready, but understanding when that will happen and what we need to put in place to know when to make that decision. That's the key thing for me, is to be able to move forward, sure that you're doing the right things and you're not wasting time, money.
Absolutely. We've certainly had a lot of conversations about making sure we're not all doing all things all the time. And how we keep talking in the we's and the us language, is how do we collectively identify those priorities and ensure that the one thing that we can work on at each time is being complemented by the activities that others are doing at the same time. So I did want to then kind of say, or bring that into, what are those immediate next steps? So we're thinking of that longer game. We've got some of those stretchier targets, but we also have some immediate needs to stay on the road right now. What's on your mind for those next steps?
At an individual organization level, there's a lot of things we can be doing. Some of them are business as usual adjacent. You know, we need to fish smarter all the time. We need to put into action everything that is a no-brainer, you know, which is, you know, fish, catch more fish, use less effort to get there. These things will lead us into the right place to get there. Making a toolkit from these actions is key for us. And as you mentioned, it is a we. You know, these pathways, one of the key things that we did find is the cross-cutting issues. You know, we're looking at an aquaculture and inshore fisheries and a deep water space, and many of the bigger issues were common across all of those. So to be able to now attack these as the work of the Circle and the entire seafood sector is critical. You know, really big things like understanding ocean monitoring, modeling. You know, we know what's going to happen in the surface. We don't necessarily know how it's going to affect the deep, our currents, all that sort of stuff. So, and this is big stuff, and it's more than any one part of the sector can handle.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned some of those no regrets strategies. And I think I've really liked that language, because there's a lot that we can do right now within our businesses that are going to enhance our business much more broadly than just climate adaptation, but are going to keep us moving forward at pace and immediately. also would add on to that we are working on putting together, as Charles said, a toolkit to go around all of these adaptation strategies, and also being able to stretch what we've learned in these individual case studies to a wider sector. And also looking at what are those next steps as the role of the circle and supporting the industry with these big cross-sector challenges. So I want to say thanks, Charles, as well for joining us today, but all of the work that you and your colleagues at Sealord have brought into the work of the implementation group. Yeah, I'm really excited to see how this is going to continue to support the industry going forward. So thank you very much. And I'm going to pass it back over to Vicky.
Thanks, Jodie and Charles. It's just interesting to sometimes still sit in the wings and see the depth and breadth of the work that the Circle does. It's lovely listening, and I hope the partners are kind of enjoying those other updates as well. So as well as new work on capital access and biotech, we also started this year work on climate scenarios for both the energy and transport sectors. So to give you a flavour of the transport work, we are joined by Alec Tang, Partner in Sustainable Value at KPMG, and Jack Bing, Assistant Manager in Sustainable Value. So Morena, and good morning, Jack and Alec. How are you?
Kia ora, Vicky. Great. We are really pumped. Thank you.
Great. So Alec, give us a brief overview of what we're trying to achieve through these transport sector climate scenarios.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear us and see us okay. So as many of the people on this call probably know, we are in this really interesting arena at the moment with mandatory climate disclosures. And one of the initial parts suggested by XRB, and as many of you have probably been part of, is the development of those sector level scenarios. So we've seen that for marine, we've talked a little bit about that, agri-tourism, banking, insurance, and so on. And so the idea here is obviously to develop a set of climate related scenarios that encompass the transport arena. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means and some of the fun that we've had as we've navigated that space. So the purpose of this piece of work obviously is to create some scenarios that participants in that sector, but also participants adjacent to. So one of the critical things that we've learned is that, you know, many of these sectors don't sit in isolation, that if you're in the marine, agri-tourism, you probably have a transport related element to your value chain. And so participants in those sectors directly and indirectly have something that they can then base their entity level scenarios off. But what we've also recognized is the interesting situation, the opportunity we have through these scenarios, that we have both the participants in the sector, but also the shapers of the system, with government, with the likes of Waka Kotahi and Ministry for Transport and so on. And so what we want to create is obviously scenarios that people can use for their entity level disclosures, but also this is a great opportunity to paint a picture of what the transport sector could be over those different time horizons, climate outcomes, and some of those key decision points that fundamentally we're facing, particularly in the short term, that sets us up for success or not over the coming few years.
Right. It's starting both energy and transport sectors at the same time. There's clearly an overlap of how those sectors continue to do the work, but also have to consider what is happening in the other one. So right from the beginning, we've been really careful to stress that there's got to be those work streams coming together. So how PwC is leading the energy work, KPMG is leading the transport. How has that manifested? How have you managed to do that so far?
Yeah. Oh, look, I think first off, you know, to tackle your point, energy, transport are intrinsically interlinked. And so it was actually really cool. As you know, we were talking, Vicky, about this piece of work. Right from the start, we reached out to Annabelle and the team to say, look, we actually do need to bring these sector scenarios together. You know, that future transport system that is highly electrified will be very contingent on both electricity, but actually broader energy, whether it's hydrogen or electricity, you know, whatever it looks like. So it's been fantastic. And I think this is what I've really enjoyed about the potential of the circle to bring, you know, two often disparate parties of KPMG, PwC together to work on this project. And what we've heard from the participants is that they've really valued the fact that we've had one workshop already where we brought our transport participants and PwC convened the energy participants and got them in the same room. Some of you will be aware that KPMG, we did a piece of work, 30 Voices on 2030, for energy. And one of the key messages that we heard was the importance of collaboration across sectors and within sectors to actually think about consistency, that we're going to make some decisions or potentially make some decisions in transport that has real implications for energy and vice versa. So it's been fantastic both to be able to work together, but also to try and nut out some of those critical intersector issues. And so we've had that one workshop so far. We're looking to draw together the groups again early in the new year as we start to hone in on those narratives that are so critical for these sector scenarios and make sure there's a degree of consistency and comparability. Going back to my earlier point, one of the challenges that we've heard generally is where organizations do have more than just one interest. So it's not just property and construction, it's not just insurance, and the compatibility between these sector scenarios is really, really important.
So final question, where are you at in the process and when is the finished work, Jack?
Yeah, so we have gone through a series of workshops. We've identified what we call driving forces. These are the external forces that create change across the different scenarios. We mapped out the different pathways that these forces might take under the scenarios that we're looking at for the transport sector. And the next step is to bring the participants together, I think on the 12th of December, where we're going to start to look at what we call scenario narratives. Now, these are the storylines that paint the three different futures that the sector might go down. And the key point here is that they've got to be a compelling storyline that is aligned to XRB requirements, but also that they are accessible to readers who maybe don't spend quite so much time in the climate space day in, day out as their day job. And just to really reinforce one of Alex's points there, we're going to really try and focus them in on what are the key decisions that the sector has to make in order to enable some of these more positive futures to come to fruition. So really excited to get the group together again. We'll conduct that work on the 12th, and then it's going to be a case of consolidating and then picking up in the new year for refinement, maybe a series of smaller HUIs with some of the air, sea and land participants, and then bringing it all together early next year. So really excited for that.
Thanks, Alec and Jack. That's great. We are down to the last 15 minutes. We're just going to do a very quick overview of our TNFD bootcamp that we ran this year. And that's mainly just to update partners who have just heard about this, but perhaps not understood how we've done that and what we've done. Look, the team at PwC took this on board for us. So we did a great job of sort of starting from scratch and kind of making this a really meaningful boot camp. I'm just going to see. It all started, of course, with Chapman Tripp's legal opinion that was released in March this year that stated that, yes, directors do have a duty to take nature-related risks into account if their company is dependent on that nature to operate, and if those risks are also material. So whilst that was now targeted at the governance level, the boot camp was how do we upskill and build that professional development at management and executive and expert level within our leading partners. So the purpose of our bootcamp was to support the application of TNFD framework in New Zealand through a collaborative process, but also including the Te Ao Māori view. And of course, in Te Ao Māori, nature is not separate. It's not seen as an externality. So it's something that almost grapples straight away with what the TNFD framework was on. So we wanted to make sure we could support and apply the framework through that lens. So specifically to facilitate cross-industry collaboration on best practices, to increase understanding, awareness and capability, and also to explore this inclusion of Te Ao Māori to inform the practical application. Our leading partners, this was part of the package for these active partners to step up to leading, was that they did receive a boutique work stream to participate in, and all of them were extremely keen to jump in and learn more about TNFDs. And as you can see, having sort of energy, agri, banking, conservation and environment in the room was great to kind of have that cross-learning opportunity as well. The workshops were based around 6 themes, so through the whole year, not only the kickoff and the introduction, but we went through each of the steps in the LEAP framework, with the final workshop held last month. And just to sort of give you a feel for what that meant, there was, of course, some pre-reading before each workshop. The actual learning sessions themselves were sort of a half day. And then often they would take that work back and kind of have an internal homework to apply that to their own organisation and how that could actually stem out. We then brought them back during that month to have an online discussion workshop where everyone could sort of share maybe their application issues or challenges or some learnings that made that much easier that the other members of the workshop and the work stream could learn from. And of course, that also meant that if there was any need to have kind of a one-on-one with PwC team in terms of something that might be just specific for them, they were also, PwC assisted those leading partners with that too. So we kicked off at the beginning of the year, and that's the process, working through the school holidays, working through everything else in terms of the demands on our participants, with the final workshop held last month, and the output, the workbook that is going to be brought together. PwC is working on that now, looking to deliver that back to leading partners next month. So the main thing was sort of the insights and learnings, I think, that came out. It is complex, starting, with a limited scope. I think straight away everyone said, let's not take it all on. Let's just bite off one thing that we could start with, or one location that we could start with, rather than feeling that they had to do every part of the business. Look, that data access was a significant challenge. I also see that as a significant opportunity. Is that how could we work to bring that together to make it easier for companies to do this reporting? And also, very specifically, learning from the climate journey. It is not double the work. Some of these things, the climate scenarios, the application of that, the TCFD framework has already been done. Those questions, some of those learnings are already starting to happen across the conversation. So how do you just make those about climate and nature? What they also learned, engaging with both internal and external stakeholders was critical. And so that's a key part of the process going forward. Integrating nature into existing processes can take a lot of time. So it's not something that has been done necessarily across all organizations. And so those processes or systems are starting those conversations has happened. And it may take years to build up to a full value chain assessment. But again, having that professional capability, that professional development worked on, starting those conversations now, starting with one area is going to help build up so that it will be ready to go. It was a whistle-stop trip through our entire TNFD program, and there's no way indicative that wasn't a thorough program and a huge amount of work by the PwC team, some of who are on the call today. So look, we're nearly out of time. I want to thank you all again for joining us this morning to go through a number of our programs. There are many that we didn't mention this morning. And look, for an example, a lot of this work has been had a deep dive into many of our webinars. So the TNFD program, we had a deep dive into that just last week, and that full webinar going through more detail of that program will be up on LinkedIn to kind of listen to as well. So thank you to everyone who has taken part, our presenters. As Larissa said this morning, the work is driven by you, that you are the power of the circle. The fact that we provide that neutral sandpit where you can come together and enable you to do that work still relies hugely on the time and energy that you put into achieving that. So thank you for that. I would now like to, I just also would like to mention that you've been stuck with me this morning because normally this would go to our Director of Engagement and Comms, Fiona McMillan, but sadly her mother did pass away at the end of last week. And so we have taken on that role for her. But Fiona will be with you next time, and we look forward to her bringing to life the circle as well, the circle work. So my pleasure to hand back to our circle co-chair, Larissa, for final remarks and the closing karakia.
Nā mihi kia koe, Vicky. Thank you to you, Vicky, and our fabulous team at Aotearoa Circle for your mahi, the many transformative projects of several that we've heard about today, and I know there are many more that are occurring as well. Thank you to you and your team for your passion and your commitment to the purpose for Aotearoa Circle, and also the commitment to our partners. Nā mihi kia koutou, we appreciate you guys. A thank you to our insightful speakers today. I personally have really appreciated hearing the wisdom about their experience and their very insightful insights that they have shared with us all today. So ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. Can I also echo Vicky's comments and thanks to you, our partners, and everyone who contributes to this amazing work of the Circle. Together, we are all making this change happen. I was thinking of a closing comment to leave with everyone today, and it's what I'm going to do is lean on actually Sir Jonathan's wisdom in his comments around massive breakthrough and enlightenment and tipping point of awareness. And so if we, a way that I like to see this journey that we're on, and to have more motivation and inspiration to lean in and to get better results, really, is I find it's all about perception. So if we can see that our response to climate change and biodiversity loss is not so much about something that we have to do, but more that it's something we get to do. It is something that we all get to do in this lifetime. And it is an absolute opportunity to radically reframe how we take action and how we approach our response to these challenges so that we can achieve better outcomes on all levels. I will now close today's session with our Aotearoa Circle closing karakia, which is a clearing karakia. So me karakia tātou. Unihia atu ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia mama. Te nākau te tinana te wairoa i te ara takata koera e rongo, whakairihia, aki ki runga, kia tina, hui e, tā ki e. Kia tino pai o koutou rā. Have a great day, everyone. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Larissa.